Kia ora koutou and malo lele. Welcome to another Music Industry Hui. I'm Teresa Patterson. I'm the chair of the Music Managers Forum and I'll be moderating today's session. Today's Hui is around radio. On the eve of New Zealand Music Month, I know that many of you out there have been asking about getting more New Zealand music on radio. So we thought, why not put on a seminar to learn about radio and to find out how radio is programmed. I would love to welcome all the speakers on today's panel. We are so very honoured to have Paul Kennedy, General Manager of Radioscope, Sean Cleaver, Assistant Content Manager, George FM, Amy Tempero, Music Director, More FM, Harry Parley, Music Director, ZM, Reagan White, Assistant Content Director, The Rock, Callum Butter, Assistant Content Director, My FM, Sarah Thompson, Program Director, BFM, Murdoch Nahor, Programmer, Ngā Iwi FM, and a face that's familiar to you all, David Ridler, Head of Music, NZ On Air. Much araha to all of you for taking the time to be part of today's panel. For those of you who are viewing, please ask questions as we go, and I'll do my best to get to them as I see the questions. And to ask questions, all you've got to do is type them into the Facebook live stream or the YouTube stream. So first up, I think we should just get a bit of a state of the nation when it comes to New Zealand content on radio. Paul Kennedy runs Radioscope, which has been going since 1999. Radioscope provides us with all of the charts, but especially the radio airplay charts, which are reported weekly and are broken into the top 100 airplay, pop, rock, urban, AC, alt, dance, te reo, and most added. Paul, welcome, and over to you.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. I just want to give you, as Teresa says, a bit of an idea of how things currently are and what the trend has been over the last little while as far as New Zealand content on radio goes. Sometimes you hear doom and gloom, and sometimes you hear all the positive spin. It's always somewhere in between the two. First of all, obviously, everybody's kind of in a very difficult time at the moment with uncertainty about how things are going to play out long term, and that applies to musicians, to music and media. Exactly what the challenges are going to be ahead, nobody's 100% sure, so we need to kind of be conscious that everybody's in a difficulty. Just to look at the sort of long-term trend of what's happened on commercial radio initially, I'm just going to put up a slide here which will hopefully give you a bit of an idea. Just give me a second to try that. So as you can see, this is the RBA code, which is essentially the voluntary quota that commercial radio signed up to. This began in 2002. Beginning of that graph, you can see where things were back in the bad portion of the 90s. Obviously, that was what stimulated the need for a code and the calls for quotas. But there was quite a steady rise for quite a long time there, where things were building up to that 20% target. And as you can see, that just has sort of stayed around that 20% mark for a while. But over the sort of 2010 to 2016, things began to just go off the boil, just slide away. The good news, and what we really want to sort of focus on, is that the trend the last 3 years, but especially the last sort of 2 years, has been for that rise all the way back to close to 20% again. So there's actually quite a flourishing of content on radio at the moment. It's a bit of a golden patch when you look at it in context for where things have been in the past. So in 2019, New Zealand music made up 18.26% of all the music on commercial radio. That was up from 16.6 the year before. This year, it's looking even better. It's just over 20%, so it's 20.01% at the moment. Within that, there's some amazing, particularly in pop, which is quite a core, important format, because it also makes up a large portion of what gets streamed and what gets sold. It's where the sort of, the stars often begin. Pop also has an important role because the tracks which do well there then cross over to other formats and become the sort of, the hits of yesteryear on other formats as time goes on. So it's really critical. ZM in particular needs to be given some kudos. They've been playing 30% New Zealand music throughout 2020 so far. That's really unprecedented at any time for a major commercial network, particularly a pop network, to be at that level. One of the good things, which is perhaps not really fully understood, is that there is quite a crop of New Zealand artists who are getting played at the moment. So there have been periods in the past where percentages can look good, and it is on the back of really sort of 2, maybe 3 artists at a time being massive. So you can go back and look at periods where the Feelers and Beckerunga and Stella and bands were sort of making up a huge portion of that. At the moment, there's probably at least 8 or 10 of those acts that take the lion's share. Everyone knows 660 is massive on radio, but there's also been Drax Project and Sons of Zion and LAB and Mitch James and Benny. It's healthy that it's not relying on just the 1 or 2 bands who produce all of the hits to come up with another one. The proportion of New Zealand music during lockdown hasn't really changed dramatically, but again, in pop and dance is where things have gone up. So that's, it's hard to sort of react very quickly. You can't sort of immediately change what you're playing, but I think there is definitely some understanding from radio stations, and I'm sure the guys here will be able to explain, exactly where things, how they program and why they program particular things. I'm just going to quickly move over to the what's happening in student and iwi radio, because those are bastions of New Zealand music. It's, for a long time they've been the stalwarts. You can see the proportion of New Zealand music played on student radio during New Zealand Music Month this time last year. That's that big spike there. So that will be coming up again and no doubt be something similar. But even without looking purely at that, you can see student radio, there's been a rise just during the lockdown period. So consistently, all those stations are, 50, 60% on a regular basis. And I think that's extremely healthy, because that's the grassroots of, it's, predominantly new music, as in, 3 to 6 weeks old. It's not stuff that's been around for a while, mostly new artists. So that's healthy. The perennial problem with, the challenge is to get some of those bands to cross into, mainstream listenership, not only here, but internationally. So getting some of those things to sort of move to the mainstream in one way or another. Iwi radio, obviously you can see there that it's fairly consistent. It may seem like there's a little decline there, but it's the 60% range all the time. And probably the challenge for iwi radio is there's such a diversity of needs that they're trying to meet, because they've got language targets, but also they're wanting to play New Zealand music, but they've also still got to maintain an audience in the same way that a commercial station does, with the songs that everybody knows and loves. So you've got sort of multiple factors that they have to take into account there. And there's not always a supply of material that is going to fit all of those criteria, particularly the language. So the more of that that's available, the more that will get played. It's pretty simple. The next graph we're just going to move to quickly is just one other measure that it's a relatively new one. We've been doing this for the last 1.5 or 2 years now. One of the criticisms that people have when there is positive statistics about how much New Zealand music played is the claim that it's all played in mid-dawns and sort of after midnight. That's not the case. There is definitely more music that is played during that time, but that's true of all music, just because there's not so many ads and there's not so much talking at that time. So the way that this impacts measure works is taking a real-time feed of the songs that are played on each of the big networks, and then matching that up with what the audience is at that time that song got played. So the value of this is you can tell how many people have heard the songs, not how many times the song has been played, but whether the audience is being reached. And so clearly, if you play a New Zealand song during breakfast when there's a large audience, you'll get lots of impacts. If you play it at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll get very few. The other thing that is often sort of forgotten is that everyone looks at the Spotify statistics, and you're looking at sort of millions of listens, and of course each one of those is by one person. The difference with radio is that if you have a song which is played at a peak time on a big station, you're potentially reaching hundreds of thousands of people with that one play. So these stats are used as a sort of comparison. You can see that there's growth there, and you can see that it's pretty consistent around that 35 million impacts per week. There's some other sort of really good signs when ZM, as I mentioned before, hitting 30%, they also passed the 10 million impacts mark for just 1 week with New Zealand music. So that's a really clear sign that music is not just being played, but also being played at the times when it matters, and it all feeds into the charts, into success and into royalties. Finally, I think that the last thing I just wanted to mention is, as I said before, there's a fairly small group of artists who get the lion's share of any stats when it comes to airplay. Don't think that's unique to radio. That happens in every aspect of sales and streaming and any other kind of measure. There's always a few sort of way out at the front and then a bit of a long tail, and that's probably true of most industries when you look at competition. But there is more diversity than I think people understand. Every week there's at least 6,000 different New Zealand songs played on New Zealand radio. So those are unique songs, and of those, it's around 2,500 to 3,000 different artists who get played every week. As I say, some of those are right at one end and they get a massive amount of that, and some are right at the other end and may have only had a song played once or twice. But it is a greater diversity than is fully understood. And I think that is probably about it. I'm happy to come back to anything if anybody has any questions, but I'll let the others speak about how radio works.
Thanks so much for that, Paul. Really interesting enough, actually, leading into this, I thought I would sit down and look at the Radioscope airplay charts, the last one that has been put out by you week to 19th of April. And I was super interested at my findings. Like in the Radioscope top 100, which is, obviously an analysis of all of the radio airplay, in the top 10, like practically 50%, 4 out of 10 are New Zealand artists. In the top 20, 9 out of 20, so again, that's nearly 50%. I feel like that's unprecedented. That's just huge. In the top 100, there are 31 New Zealand artists, and that's like nearly a third. And the most interesting thing that I found out of that, 10 of that 31 are indies, not majors. So it's super positive. David, you might be able to answer this question. There's been a few comments saying, where did the 20% quota come from? Why do we only aim for 20%? Can't it be higher? Oh, you're muted.
Damn, my broadcasting skills fail me again. That is actually an agreement between the Radio Broadcasters Association and the Ministry for Culture and Heritage. So that was set up in a staggered way from about 2001, 2002. and has been in place ever since, and it's been rolled over and rolled over. So I think that's renegotiated on a regular basis. I think, to be fair, if you look at Paul's stats from that first slide where you see New Zealand music content, there was a real lull in the early 2010s, and so to get back to 20% for a lot of stations felt like a real stretch, but happily we see that growth over the last 2 or 3 years that has got things back really into a much healthier position. And look, it depends on the music cycle. It depends on the bands that are around at the moment. I mean, the radio guys will talk to you about how they program, and, you get a look behind the curtain at what they're factoring in when they make those playlist decisions. Dreaded research and the science of radio programming. But yeah, that is the basis of that agreement. It's between the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and the Radio Broadcasters Association.
And I mean, essentially, you're saying there is room that could be renegotiated. I mean, we have ZM already at 30%. Well done. No pressure on the rest of you. But, there is the potential, and the fact that 50% of the top 20 at the moment are New Zealand artists, and nearly 30% of the top 100. I mean, it's fantastic work, I feel.
I've been looking at that. I look at that chart pretty intensively every week, as you can imagine, T, and that's 25 to 30 artists in the top 100 has been consistent for about the last 6 months. And the amount of artists in that top 20 has been pretty consistent too. But it's kudos to all of the songwriters and producers in New Zealand who have been stepping up and going, we're not competing locally anymore. That, we live in a Spotify world and a global platform world where you are competing for listeners' ears with the best of the entire world. So that's the kind of benchmark that you're looking at.
Well, actually, that does lead me to the next question that, David, maybe you might be the best person just to do a quick outline about how commercial radio is programmed. For all of you out there that don't know, David started his career as a radio programmer at a radio station called Channel Z, then went to work for New Zealand On Air, then went back to radio, and then is now back at NZ On Air. So you're quite qualified to answer this question.
Yes, I've had a career of taking starboard and port between NZ On Air and radio. Look, I'm really interested to throw over to the radio guys, but I guess the thing I would say is my knowledge of radio is that commercial radio is targeting, in general terms, big mainstream audiences, people who use music for different purposes in their daily lives, whether it's commuter background, something to listen to in the commute, whether it's at work, whether it's just when they're hanging out at home, or whatever it might be. But one of the key things that we get taught when we're working in that, where you realize when you're working in that industry, is that familiarity is really what you are after when you're playing music. You don't want to scare your audience away with too much new or too much, I don't know what it is. And that's the commercial model. It's completely different for student radio, and it's completely different for iwi radio. So, that's the wonderful thing about the broadcast spectrum in New Zealand, is we have a really wide array of radio stations for every taste. But in the commercial world, familiarity with the music is a really key metric for programming.
How many songs, and any one of you feel free to answer this, because I'm sure it's the same across the board, but how many songs are on playlist on average?
Ooh, that's probably something people don't want to reveal too readily, because it's kind of sensitive information, but it's definitely less than what people would assume of a station the size of The Rock or ZM or The Edge. People would assume there's thousands of songs on their playlists that is spinning regularly across a week, when in fact it's 3 digits likely, and it's probably lower to mid 3 digits, rough ballpark for your classic or your traditional commercial station, which that's one of the first things we sort of get taught at broadcasting school as programmers, is you're not actually playing this wide range of songs. You're the smaller your music universe is, the more familiarity you can bank on for your audience to stick around.
And so then how many songs are added? How many new songs are added each week?
I can only speak from a rock perspective at this point. It's for us, it's very few at the moment. It's no surprise that we're not in a huge rock music cycle. So for us, we really need to find the cream of the crop to be adding to our playlist, and we could go weeks with not adding a new song if we feel it doesn't fit the sort of criteria for a new ad. But I'll let some of the CHR guys answer there as well.
Callum.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Harry. Who just spoke? Callum.
Yeah, I mean, for my, it all differs sort of on how much is moving through. So we get new research every week, and based on that research, we decide whether songs are coming off playlist, whether they're getting more spins on playlist, whether we're slowing down the amount of spins they get. So the amount we add every week differs. I'd say at max, and this happens once every couple of months, we'll add 4 songs in a week. But generally, we're adding 2 songs max. And at we're sort of always aiming to have, if we're adding 2 songs, we want one of those to be Kiwi. And we want to make sure that at least 30% of that new music category is Kiwi at all times.
How many songs do you get pitched per week?
I couldn't put a number on that. I probably get 40 to 50 emails a week with music submissions. And personally, I love that because that line of communication is really important. It means we can go out and give some feedback. It means we sometimes get sent a song that is just an absolute gem. There's one that came out on Friday by an artist called Valet from Christchurch, and it is really incredible. And he just sent that straight to me a couple of months ago, and I was just mind blown. The production on that song and the message, the video, and that was all funded by NZ On Air as well. It's all just incredible.
So I do want to come back to research because that's something that you touched on, and I don't think a lot of people fully understand. But it's just really interesting, Callum, that you just said that you got sent a song direct, and there seems to be a lot of people that believe that only the major labels can pitch to radio, but obviously that's not the case. Harry, do you want to talk on that?
Very quickly, if I could just jump back to the last question on adding new music. The thing that I didn't really realize when I first started as a radio programmer, I wanted to come in and play all these new artists that I heard of from a pop perspective, international and local artists. When you add a new song, the playlist, the higher rotating songs, the new songs and the hot songs, it's a set number until you change sort of your programming strategy in those categories. And so to add a song to those categories, you have to take a song out. So it's not just as easy as I like this song or this song's doing well, so therefore it's going on our station. You have to make the decision to move something that is currently working for you. And that goes back to David's point on familiarity, is that those songs are familiar in your audience. It's one of their favorite songs right now and they're loving it. And the research, which we'll get into a little bit later, is showing that, backing that up. The charts are backing that up. You have to stop playing or slow down how much you're playing that song to add a new song on. So that would be the reason, if you hear that we're only adding 2-3 songs a week and it seems low, that's the reason, is that we have to slow down other songs in order to do that. So it's just, I think, an important point to realize from a radio perspective, is that we do want to play new music. It's just being tactical about how much we add each week in order to have a playlist which is both a balance of familiar and new.
But that's across the board, though. You know, high rotate has to be finite, because if you add too many songs to high rotate, it's not high rotate anymore. So you are always, picking favorites at the expense of something that already exists within that rotate. It's hard.
That's really interesting, especially coming from student radio where, you believe that the DJs can just choose what they want to play, but you do have certain songs that are in rotate, right?
Yes, we do. Obviously, if you're a 1970s specialist bluegrass expert, we're not going to put playlist content in your show because you're an expert in your field. But if you have a daytime show, some part of that will be DJ choice, because we trust you to make your own decisions, but also we would love you to incorporate our playlist choices with yours. Use your skill as a DJ to make it seem seamless. Yes, we do have a playlist.
I just want to bring it back to the audience, because that's been mentioned a couple of times about how important the audience is to radio. Why is that?
We live and die by our audiences, because that's who we're there to cater for. Every station has well, especially talking from the commercial model, we have a target audience that we need to cater to, because as a company, MediaWorks, for example, with 7 or 8 radio stations, we want to fill the spectrum and take up as much of that audience as possible, because if we strip away our passion for new music and supporting local and informing, entertaining, educating, if you take all of that away, we're a commercial entity that is here for 2 things: ratings and revenue. We're a business that is here to make money. And in order to do that, you need to know who you're targeting and be really good at targeting that audience. So when it comes to the research, those are the people that you're targeting to ask them what they think of the songs you're playing. And the feedback they get is, is targeted, because it's demographically sound around those people. So for the rock, it's a 25 to 44-year-old male. That's our core audience. That's not to say we don't have female listeners. We're actually a 60-40 split of male to female, which I think would surprise a lot of people. But we are constantly targeting that 25 to 44-year-old male in order to present our brand and to sell that to advertisers, because that's what we do.
And I do really think that's key, is that people do forget that radio is a business and that you do have to make money. And to do that, you need to have as big an audience as possible in order to be able to sell the advertising to make that money.
Yeah.
Reagan, can I go back to you on the research? Can you explain to me how research is done? How do you research songs?
Yeah, so it varies across the stations, but for the most part, it's a panel that we're constantly recruiting and building. We want as many of our listeners as possible to be a part of this, because the more numbers you've got, the better. You can never have too many stats when it comes to music research. So we recruit panels by incentivizing them. You'll probably notice Facebook advertising every now and then. Come and rate the songs on our playlist for a chance to win some cash or a TV or whatever the hell it happens to be. And then we weekly or fortnightly, depending on the brand, we will give you a list of roughly 20 to 30 songs, which are our current rotates, and give you a chance to listen to the hooks, the most familiar parts of those songs. And based on that 15-second hook or 10-second hook or whatever it is of the song, you tell us if you like the song, you don't like the song, if you want to hear more of it, or you've heard too much of it. It's a really quick, easy survey for listeners to do. And like I said, it's incentivized so that we get our listeners to feel like they're part of a community and that they're responsible for controlling the playlist, because to a certain extent, they absolutely are. And then we get a spreadsheet of results back from the survey, which is super valuable to us, because we can see exactly how a song is trending in terms of how much positive acceptance it's got from our audience, how much burn it has. So that's when people are starting to get sick of it. And we can track its performance and a lot of the time predict how it's going to go on playlist as well. So when a new song gets added to a playlist and we get results back in its first test, we can see a potential score of over 100, for example. We're going, this song has got legs to go to an A rotate, so we're going to back it, because we can see already that the audience is into it and they want to hear it more. That's not to say there aren't other factors that define how often we'll play a song. Like if there's a groundswell of Spotify spins, or there's a national tour that an artist is doing that's going to help. We obviously take all that kind of stuff into consideration, the bigger story. But at the core of what we do, the research is sort of definitive in how often we play these songs, because it is all about familiarity.
I have a question here. Does a song have to be on playlist to go into research, or do you include tracks you are potentially looking at to go into research to see what reaction is like from people participating in the research?
You can put in a song that hasn't gone onto playlist, but because it is based on your recall of that song, the stats are going to be up against it, because they haven't heard. You're assuming that listener hasn't heard that song yet if it hasn't been on playlist. Perhaps it's something that another station's playing that you want to dip your toes in, so we could chuck that into research. Or perhaps it's had a sync on a TV show or a movie, or on a vodka ad, and you want to see if it's going to perform with your audience. So definitely, it doesn't have to have been on playlists. But in saying that, we're not going to go and test 100 unfamiliar songs to see how they go, because you're obviously not going to get great results.
How long, so you've added a song, it's a new song, it's on playlist. How long has it been on playlist before you start to research it?
I'll throw to one of the pop guys for one of those. It's for the rock format, we're really slow with new music, given that we're not in a rock cycle. So it can be a month, 6 weeks before it starts to move up. But in terms of testing it, once it's on playlist, we want to start to get the numbers on it straight away, just so we know. But I'll throw to one of the so maybe Amy at More FM to take over.
Yeah, I think it really depends on every song. Every song is completely different, and sometimes you can expect a song to fire straight away, and then it takes a while to show results. But I think for us, it's probably a couple of weeks before we start to see any testing results. For More FM in particular, our audience are a little bit more shy of new music as compared to Edge or ZM. So it takes a little bit longer for the audience to get familiar and to actually show signs of liking it. So I would say about a month for us to see some results on a song.
But you have started researching it straight away the moment that it's added?
Yeah, usually once we edit, we'll leave it about a week or so, just because we know in the first week it's just going to be unfamiliar. But after that, yeah, usually about a week before we start testing.
I've got a question here. As the live industry is likely to be local only for quite some time, leading to a possible increase in audience for a number of local acts, do you see that leading to stations increasing their local artist plays and possibly include some songs that are more borderline of the genres that they play? And I feel this feeds into something that we were discussing yesterday in our tech rehearsal about formats. And when people are pitching to you guys to understand the format of the radio station that they're pitching to. So, Sean, can you talk around that?
Yeah, of course, I can only talk for George FM. I get a lot of music submissions, and most of them are not dance music, and you just have to look at what we are. Back about what Callum was saying, how he was getting songs sent directly. If you end up with a good relationship, either with the artist or with like a indie music manager or something, if they send you good songs that, you get excited about, that you very well may or may not play, you might actually open those emails, as opposed to somebody who keeps sending you, Hungarian folk music. Like, I'm going to stop eventually opening those emails. So you do have to, as a new music creator, it can be tempting to just send it to everybody, and maybe they'll see something in it you don't. But I think a more careful approach about targeting, kind of, setting goals for the song. Like if you set out to make a drum and bass song, like, sure, send it to George. Our audience loves drum and bass, but you're probably gonna have a crap time at More FM. So these are just things that you need to think about in your plan of the song.
Harry, what about you at ZDM? I mean, what are the guidelines around your format and borderlines of the genres that you can play?
Yeah, pop music's a funny one because what is pop? It can change all the time depending on essentially what's popular. It's kind of changed in the last couple of years. We have gone a bit more broad, I think. We've definitely dipped into urban more than we had previously, there was a spike of urban in the late 90s, early 2000s where that was popular music, but sort of went away for a while. It's come back now, driven by these massive viral hits and the influence of streaming as well. And I think that's the important thing to remember as well, is streaming's there now, and it's bigger than it's ever been. We have these viral hits as well as our internationally established artists that we want to play and our locally established artists that we want to play. And by the time you've ticked all those boxes and got the songs from those categories you want, you can, if you're not careful, end up with a full playlist, leaving no room for the new local artists. And so obviously we want to nurture that next level of New Zealand artists, to bring them through and have those new local established artists for when we need to add songs and there's nothing coming through the international channels that is strong enough for us. So we have to look broadly. It is tough though for the amount of radio stations that are in New Zealand and having their different niches. We're not going to do urban as well as My FM does. So for us to add too many songs or look into too many new local urban acts and play a higher percentage of them, we're starting to compete with My FM as well as competing with Edge, which we already do to some level, but we're making it extra difficult for ourselves if we start trying to play on everyone's domain. Our audience are going to go, if we introduce our audience to lots of that type of music, this is the commercial side of radio coming in again, they could get a real taste for that kind of music and then all of a sudden jump and not be a listener for us anymore, which is good for the artists, but then from our selfish radio commercial side, we've just lost a listener, and that does, it's sort of been brought up before, dilute everything in a sense as well. If we have less listeners, then the Kiwi artists we do play benefit less. And I think that's sort of true across all radio stations commercially and student and iwi as well, is that the more listeners we have, it's actually to the smaller New Zealand artists' benefit when we play a massive international or massive local hit. So if we play the latest 660 song that's rotated every radio station into your, or out of your, well, mainly into your new Kiwi song that we're playing as our feature this week, the amount of audience that are carrying on to then listen to at least the start of your song is higher than if we were playing a unfamiliar song into your Kiwi song. So it's actually almost to the benefit of the smaller Kiwi musician when we do play those larger already established hits, because the amount of audience that are listening and follow on to give your song a chance is higher. I've gone way off topic and way on a tangent, which people that know me know it's a bit of a hairy staple. But trying to bring it back to genres again, ZM being pop station, mainly we're looking for the immediate pop sounds, which a lot of produced music, electronic, ballads still work for us. Difference being if something's got a sort of a more staple pop production behind it, it's probably going to be more immediate for our station. Something that's a ballad isn't as immediate, but if it does resonate with the audience, it has the potential to go massive and stick around for a long time and not burn, which Reagan was talking about before with the research perspective. They're the songs that can stick around for a long, long time. I know Stan Walker Give was massive at the moment, 660 Long Gone, sort of those slower songs that really strike a chord with the audience can go massive. So I'm looking at ballads, I'm looking at produced more staple pop production. I'll look at what My FM are playing in the urban field and flavour. I'll look at what Sean's playing at George, because the songs that are most popular at dance can cross over to pop as well. Really broad range of music. It's sort of the luxury of being able to take the best of what's popular at each sort of niche music format and make that into one playlist.
On formats, if I can jump on that, Harry, too, I think if you take away the restrictions and borders around what a format is in terms of its target audience and the style of music it plays, radio can be really aspirational too, and it can, you might take a punt on a song because it makes you feel good, and pop stations like ZN, Edge, and even more in the hits, people listen to those stations to feel good and have a good time. So, or maybe it's someone at the older end of the audience that wants to feel younger, or maybe you listen to Radio Hodaki or George FM because you want to feel cooler. There's a lot of that radio can do outside of the constraints of its commercial audience.
Murdoch, how does it work at iwi radio around programming and genres and formats?
Look, I actually think it's quite fascinating just listening to everyone. Iwi sits in a really unique position in that, we're really thinking about the whole whānau. So you'll notice as you travel through Aotearoa, because there are 21 Māori radio stations, and each iwi station usually operates quite autonomously. And it really does come down to who the programmer is in the station. But a lot of them also focus around nostalgia. So when you go to a lot of these smaller towns, regional towns, The iwi stations are playing a lot of nostalgic music that you know, a lot of our people kind of grew up with, as well as a lot of Māori music. I've found that over the years, I mean, I started in Māori radio, and then I moved to My FM, then I started teaching radio at the New Zealand Radio Training Store, and then I moved back to Māori radio. So when I started in Māori radio, it was a kind of free for all. The playlist was quite broad. It was actually huge. Then of course, when I moved to started learning about radio, when I taught radio, I came back to where I'm at the moment at Ngā Iwi FM in Paidor, and started applying what I've learned about radio. So our radio station now sounds a bit more, I suppose, still nostalgic, but we're also very much listening to our audience. So we're getting a lot of feedback, although we might not be commercially, you know, as popular as a lot of the big radio stations. We're very much connected to our communities, and our communities are, you know, and we're seeing people at Countdown yelling out to us about, you know, oh, how come you're not playing this song? How come you're not playing that song? So we're very much reacting to that, as well as, you know, I'm listening to My FM, I'm listening to all of those big stations, all of the peers here, and we're very much going by what our audience is telling us. You know, we might hear one of our kaumātua say, oh, I love that Prince Tui Teka song, you know, Mum. So, you know, we'll slide it in there for a week, yeah? So we're very reactive to what our audience is feeding back to us. But you know what's really encouraging, and I'm going back to, you know, at the start when you were talking about the statistics, is that New Zealand music is, you know, the production of it, and the availability of it, it's really taking a step up, and that's what's really encouraging, and that's what really encourages us. Yeah, like, as far as people coming to us to submit tracks, we're not that special, because everyone wants to be played on commercial radio. But when we do get tracks, you know, we do have, I suppose, what you could call a standard, and really that's at the production level. So I noticed that we are always getting people sending in folk songs, which is adorable. But you know, in the same token, we've got to assess the quality of it, and you know, those are just standard things. But we encourage anyone to send us tracks, and of course, when we have bands that start off here locally, they'll send us their tracks as well, which we love. And you know, wherever we can kind of slide it in at a moment, because it is about capturing moments during our breakfast show or our drive show, and acknowledging our local talent, then yeah, we take every opportunity.
Also, I would like to say that I feel iwi radio is very special and is super important in the New Zealand landscape, musically and with radios. So you guys are, I feel, really, really important. And just before you go, Mirko, I do have a question. I'm not too sure if you can answer, but who programs the iwi stations that currently have no local staffing? Is there a central programmer, or do they run old playlists?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it does really go by who is actually, you know, on staff. And iwi radio is a taxpayer-funded group. Of course, this is Crown controlled through Te Māngai Pāho, which is our funder. So we have obligations as far as language programming, and not all iwi radio stations have got a full staff. Our operation here in Paidor, there's only 5 people that are here, and we're doing all of the jobs. Yeah, so I'm also doing production. I'm also doing on air. I'm actually on air at the moment. This isn't the studio, but I've taken a step out of the studio. But you know, we're doing everything from greeting people at the door to making the cups of teas, to setting up the gazebo at the Hauraki Kapahaka Festival, or our, you know, off-station outside broadcasts. So we are kind of doing everything on the smell of an oily rag, but we've been doing it for so long that everyone just adapts. You know, I mean, I loved my time when I was working at Ngā Iwi FM. It was lovely being the centre of attention. But then when I came back to Iwi Radio, it was a really humbling experience just to see how integrated our Iwi radio station was to in our community, and how important it was that people, you know, saw us out and about as well, and just the engagement that we have on that ground level. You know, at the rugby games, you know, and I'm talking about those sports fixtures and at kapahaka events. It's really lovely just to connect with people and hear their immediate feedback, you know, on what we've said on the radio in the morning, or what they heard, you know, at the new Benny song. You know, it's lovely to just get their feedback, and we're always responding to that. But we do try to keep whānau as our main focus. So that's why we're very nostalgic in parts in our programming. So we've noticed that a lot of our kaumātua are listening really late at night. So from about 12 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, that's when our kaumātua and our elder demographic are really listening to us. So our programming is very specific as far as iwi specific history. And then from, say, 7 o'clock through to 8 o'clock at night, it's very much, I suppose, we try to apply more of a commercial, young, hipper format. And I'm not too sure if I even answered your question. Sorry.
You did, and also you just demonstrated why Iwi radio is so important in the radio landscape. Sarah, this is a question for you. I'd like to hear from non-commercial radio persons some case studies, well, they have to be a case study, on New Zealand music successes that got their first air on a non-commercial station and how that station supported the musician.
So many. For the SRN in total, I should explain what the SRN is. Student Radio Network, there are 5 stations. There's Radioactive in Wellington, Radio Control in Palmerston North, Radio 1 in Dunedin, there is 95 BFM in Auckland, and there's RDU in Christchurch. So many bands. And I think all of the program directors believe that that's part of our job, to be the entry point for a lot of artists into the rest of the industry. So when we're looking for music, it's a search, it's a dig. You know, you're going to gigs and saying, do you have anything recorded? Can I have it, please? One band who has been very lovely in their press about saying point blank that they got their start in student radio are the Beths. In interviews, they're very kind and mention us, so shout out Beths. Recently, I also believe that the SRN stations were part of, but not wholly responsible for, the successes of artists like Church NAP and Marlon Williams, but we're part of a bigger picture, you know what I mean? I love being on the ground floor. You're searching all the time and trying to platform things and boost them up.
Awesome, thanks so much for that. Someone, I can't remember who it was, talked about how you guys do like, as programmers, you do like to take a punt on a song. And I've been really encouraged by the fact that you've all been talking about how you do get emails from people that are not signed to a major label who are indie. I'm going to go around the panel and then just ask you, what tips can you give to people who want to pitch you a song at radio to give them the best chance for you to consider them to be added to your playlist? Amy, I'll start with you.
Cool. I think for us, it's just giving a story of why you think it'll work for our audience. I think a lot of people come to us talking as if we are the likes of Edge or ZM. We are, while we do play a lot of the new songs, we are quite different as well. We're a little bit older. And I think if people come to us with a reason why they think it might work more on us rather than Edge or ZM, or why we should be the ones to go on it first, say, I think just being very specific with the people you're talking through. It's quite obvious when a push is copy and pasted and you've just swapped out the station name. So I think, yeah, being specific with the station that you're talking to really stands out to me.
Thanks for that. Callum, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, is in quite a unique place for commercial radio, where we're open to pretty much every genre when it comes to Kiwi music. And that isn't the same internationally, but our audience is very receptive of the fact that artists are Kiwi. So I don't feel like this is the best example because it was massive internationally, but Benny Glitter was a really big song for us, and it had 6 weeks in an A, which is the top rotate, and that is a pure pop song. So when you're coming to us, I'm open to a lot of different kinds of music, and the best thing to do is just send it through. If it's good quality, I personally love a point of difference. I saw someone saying asking a question before about taking risks on songs and whether we're scared to because it might jeopardize our jobs, but that is really not the case. It's the same taking a risk on a unknown international artist as it is on a local unknown artist. And I'd say it's almost easier to take it on a local unknown artist because we get the local support from listeners. So if I'm going point of difference, Church and AP again, the hook on Ready or Not was like just unreal. It was different. Yeah, Church doing the falsetto, it really stood out. And I remember when I first heard that song, I was just like, that's a hit. Like, it's just different and it's good. The production quality is amazing. It's been mixed and mastered properly. And for me, that is what I really like to see, because that a song that's going to make me go, hold up, I wasn't expecting that. And that's really a good driving point for our music meetings and when we're looking to playlist songs.
Awesome, thanks. Regan, over to you.
I think, yeah, it's Amy made a good point that if it's addressed to us and we know it's an email that's been sent to us, it's a song that they want to get on our station. You can tell that it's come from a good place and they're really trying hard. I think there's the proof that there's a story happening around your act, like Skinny Hobos, for example, were kind of a two-piece band that no one had heard of, but they had a great song. And I think that is what surpasses any good story or good relationship that you've got with a band or an act or a label, whatever it is. The song's got to be good. And to Callum's point of comparing a new local track to a new international track, if a new Foo Fighters song turned up on my desk next to a new Miss June track, and the Miss June track was better, then we were going to play the Miss June track. It comes down to the quality of the song, the quality of the writing, the hook, how it makes you feel, how it sounds in the mix on our brand for our audience. And I think you can't beat that. It comes down to a great song that we want to play on the radio, I think, more than anything, more than the way you email us or how many treats you drop off at the radio station. Those can help. But yeah, it comes down to basics there, I think. Good songwriting.
Sean, what about for George?
Yeah, I feel it appropriate to touch on some specifics here. We get all of us programmers have a lot of emails in our inbox at any given time. There's if you send your song and it's not a WeTransfer link or a Dropbox link, and it's not 100% mastered, or it's just, if it's not 100% professional, then you're already on the back foot. So my big point would be professional with those small things do matter. Be professional in your etiquette as well. Sometimes when we push back on a song, which 90% of the time, like we've talked about, we can only add a few songs. Sometimes I get a bit of lip, a bit of attitude from people, and that's not that it's a personal thing. If the song's good, the song's good. But don't do that.
Manners go a long way in this industry.
Yeah, so be professional, and take some feedback on board. But yeah, the main thing is be professional in the email. Be professional with your sound quality. Don't send through things that are half mastered or half this, or you have plans for that. Like,
yes, thank you.
We've talked about competing, with streaming and stuff. Like, the reality is, like, music is a tough gig, and it's you are competing with the best of the best. We'll add anyway, I won't go into specifics, but yeah, I think I've made my point.
Teresa, if I can just say that I agree with all of the points being made, and just specifically as to Māori music, we're really listening for the competency of Te Reo Māori. You know, we've had people who have just finished a Te Reo Māori course, and it might be like the first year that they've done it, and they've sent us a song, and you can hear the experience of Te Reo being used. So for us, as far as Te Reo Māori music, it would be the competency level of that Te Reo being recorded.
Awesome, thank you, Murdoch. Harry, what about ZM?
Yeah, just echoing everyone else's points on this is very similar to my experiences. Send the song, because if we're looking last minute for a feature track at night for our Countdowns, a Discover track we call it on ZM, if you've sent me the song, I could easily get it in, and that's at least your first play out of the way. If you've sent a Spotify link, I'm not going to go and record a song off Spotify. And yeah, you've just sort of almost lost your opportunity, maybe potentially in that one small mistake. So send the song firstly. I think a lot of artists at the moment are falling into the trap of how easy it is to release a song now with streaming. So you can record your song, you can make your Spotify account, you can upload it there. And then I'm getting a lot of emails sort of 6 weeks later. Hey, I'm a brand new Kiwi artist. Here, this is the Spotify link to my song. It's had this many streams, and it was on New Music Friday. Streaming is great, and New Music Friday is great, don't get me wrong, but sometimes those playlists are 90 songs long. And if you get your placement at the bottom of that, that is better than not being on there. But if that's your whole strategy for a release, is that you've got a New Music Friday New Zealand placement at 90th out of 91, and that's how you're hoping your song's going to become a hit. The competition in New Zealand music's just too strong for that to be your only sort of release day strategy. So there's a lot of resources out there. David might be able to talk about what NZ On Airs can do and connections. We've got Jeff from NZ On Air who comes and talks to us for me once a fortnight and pitches me all, especially a lot of unsigned New Zealand acts and newer New Zealand acts. So getting in touch there and making sure you've got a strategy around your release. I'm much more likely to respond or make a plan to play your track if I can see your strategy and your seriousness around your music is more than just making the song, maybe getting on a playlist and then coming to us later and going, hey, I got this many streams, I should get radio play. It's just too competitive environment for that now. Sorry, Sarah.
No, I was interrupting you. And if you have no streams, if you don't have professional mixing and professional mastering, but it's good enough to be played at a certain bit rate and broadcast, send it to an SRN station. Especially send it to the station that is closest to where you live, because DJs love playing music that's local. They love being able to say, this band is playing in a week's time, you should go and check it out. In saying that, when you do send it to an SRN station, please don't send a 3-page bio. Please send a streaming link and a download link. And when I say streaming link, I do not mean Spotify. Help yourself out, make it brief, because it's exactly like Reagan was saying, the song's the thing. If it's an amazing song, we know where you're from and it's rad, you'll jump on air. It's very quick with SRN to get on radio.
Also, Sarah, should people target the specialist shows that you have?
It depends on the show. Some shows, I mean, I can only really speak to BFM. For example, our long-running New Zealand content show loves being submitted demos, live recordings, whatever. They're a real hunter. But other specialist shows, not so much. So know who you're sending it to. Unless you're sending it to the program director of an SRN station, just send them whatever. Send us everything.
David, this is a question for you. How many non-NZ On Air funded musicians get played on commercial radio? Are you able to answer that here?
Non-funded?
Yeah.
I don't have a stats analysis of that, but quite a few. I think there's a misconception that the only way you can get coverage is if you're a funded artist. So I've got some great examples of artists that are not funded that get plenty of attention, and Fat Freddy's Drop is one of them. Lord was one of them. 660 haven't been funded since their early days, so all of the last couple of records have been self-funded. So, and then there's plenty of other artists who have just come along with a really great song. You know, they might have missed out on a new music single round, or they might have just gone, I'm just going to do it regardless, and have fronted up with a really great song. And, you know, with our pitching to radio and to streaming services, if we really believe a song has got some legs, so we don't sort of go, oh, it's not funded, we're not even going to look at it. We do try and accommodate that. Obviously, we will back our investments and what we have already funded. But, you know, when a good song comes through, you can't, just like the radio guys have said, you can't deny it. If it pops, then you really want to see it. You, like any music fan, if you hear a great new song, you want everybody you know to hear it, right? We're all music fans, and that's the kind of driving force for all of us.
Can I say actually that when we were all a meeting before the seminar went live, something that I haven't experienced before was that all of these programmers were chatting about new music and New Zealand music that they'd heard, and we're going, have you heard this? Oh my gosh, it's so good. Have you heard this track? Have you heard this track? So there is actually a whole lot of passion for music and for New Zealand music amongst this panel here, which was just so heartening to me to experience leading up to starting this session. I'm not too sure if anyone can answer this question because we haven't got someone here from the Edge, but how about increasing the quota of NZ music videos on the radio TV shows such as the Edge?
I could probably speak to that, having been music director for the Edge and Edge TV concurrently. The goal with Edge TV is to try and mirror the Edge radio format on TV, so it's this kind of the same product, if that makes sense. But in saying that, there are songs that are on Edge radio that don't have a video. So in my tenure there, that did open up opportunities for that. And I know that I tried to use that as an opportunity for, if there wasn't a spot on radio playlist that week, that we could put the video on Edge TV as sort of a warm up. And then when there was a slot available on radio, then that could have been the first cab off the rank. Whether Marty, Brad, and Casey do that now, I'm not entirely sure, but that's how I aimed to make it work when I was there a few years ago.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Reagan. Oh, we've run out of time. That hour went by super quickly. There has been a question as to if we can have a list of contact emails for each station. We'll look into that after this so people can pitch you. But I would just like to thank you all so much for taking part in this seminar. I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy schedules. And I know it's busy because I caught the chat leading up to the seminar about stuff I didn't even understand about radio. I also want to say a massive thanks to Waiere Iti from Akudos, Grace from the MMF, Dylan from IMNZ, and Lydia from APRA AMCOS for helping us today in this hui. So once again, thank you all, and we'll see you, the audience out there next week, next Thursday, for another music industry hui.
Thanks, guys.